What's going on, everybody? It's Zach here with another episode of Clutch Crew Sports, and we've got a full show lined up for you today. So we've got all four podcaster members here to talk about different stories. The national championship game might be starting as we wrap this up. We are recording on Monday night, so at the end we'll give our predictions, or maybe we should do it at the beginning, who we think's going to win. But I already know what everybody's going to say.
Well, I mean, we all picked the same team, so
Yeah, we all picked LSU. I'll just say it right now. Yeah, we all picked LSU. I think it will be a kind of close game. I can see it being like a final score like 45 to like 38 or something like that. That's what I see it high scoring. I think it'll get to the 40s. But it should be a fun one nonetheless. You got the best offense versus the best defense. We'll see if the referees have a hand in this game like they did in the Clemson-Ohio State game. There's been a lot of controversial referee stuff going on lately. You know, the Packers-Seahawks game, I still think that was a bad call to have him get a first down. I thought it was short, but nonetheless, we'll be talking about that probably in the next episode. But
we've already talked about the refs enough on this show.
Yeah, we spent a whole episode talking about NFL referees.
Well, I mean, they just keep giving material, so it's hard to
that's
hard
their
to not
problem.
talk about it.
Yeah,
if they would stop giving so much material, we wouldn't have to talk about it so much.
Yeah.
They need to just put a microchip in the ball so we know where it is. Like, that's what I'm thinking. Like,
we'll see.
We have the technology. Like,
we have the technology. But no, I was saying how, like, they should. One of the few things that I think they should take from the Alliance of American Football is that whole eye in the sky thing, where they have like basically, I don't know how many officials there are on the field at one time. I think there's like 9 on the field. But then basically they have like a 10th official sitting up in the box. So that way, if a call is wrong, like if they call, like a pass interference on the field, and it was like clearly wasn't, or like if they call an offside on the field and it clearly wasn't, then the person up in the box can be like, hey, that was the wrong call, change it. And they can do that almost instantaneously when they do that. So I feel, that way they can it still has the human element to it, because some people are like, oh, you don't want to go technology because you want the human element, but at least the human element's still there, and it's not really like slowing down the game at all.
Yeah, that's the thing. You don't want it to slow down, but man, I still think they should put a chip in these balls and geotag it or something, because that way you don't have to guess when like you can't see the ball and it's like questionable on the goal line or something like that. Like,
Use the technology maybe they have in tennis.
Yeah. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how that goes out in the future. But so today, guys, we're going to be talking about a wide variety of different sports here and really unique topics as well. I'm going to be starting out talking about Marshawn Lynch's recent post-game speech and the message behind it and everything. And then Nate is going to be talking about the Houston Astros, how that investigation went. Personally, I'm not aware of anything going on in baseball, so I saw on Twitter that they got a bunch of draft picks and people like got fired and stuff, but I don't really know the reasoning behind it. So he's going to inform us on that. And then Eric's going to talk about his favorite basketball team and how they're off to a surprising start. I know he'll be happy to talk about that. And then Connor's going to talk about the future of the Ravens now that they've lost 2 home playoff games in back-to-back seasons. And so we got a little bit of everything, some football, baseball, and basketball for you on this show. And each of us will get responded to by somebody as well. So you won't be just hearing my take on something or just Eric's take. We're going to all interact with each other's stories like usual. So I'll get us started here. Actually, before I do that, I got to share you guys some trash talk and some ownage going on recently on Twitter.
Ownage.
I've been quite more active on Twitter over the break, especially last week, and somebody tweeted out something about the Seahawks-Packers game that I thought was different. I guess he said it one thing, and I was like, I disagreed with him, and I just stated my opinion, basically. And then he responded to that and totally changed the subject by trying to attack my personal Twitter name here, Payon for Unique Ngakwe. he said Unique Ngakoue will be a Raven. And then I said, you wish, he's getting tagged. But then I was like, I can do better than this, because I looked and I saw his bio over here. And his bio's got a bunch of different sports teams. He's got the Ravens, the Lakers, the Marlins, and then Gators football. To me, I don't know why people put football and basketball into things. Like, if you're going to support a university, you got to support all their teams. But
Yeah, it's kind of
which makes him even more of a bandwagon. Yeah, it makes him even more of a bandwagon, because Gators basketball is having a bad season. So I wouldn't be surprised if he puts like Duke basketball in there now. But
or I don't know, maybe Ohio State basketball or Gonzaga basketball.
Yeah, just somewhere other, just some random part of the country. Just pick whatever team's doing best, because it's pretty weird to be a fan of those unique teams. So I told him, looking at the teams in your bio, did you become a Ravens fan before or after Lamar won the MVP? And he never responded to it, so I'm sure it got read.
I will say one thing, at least to his credit, he's a Marlins fan, and they're complete garbage, so I will give him credit for that. But
yeah, so I don't know.
Other than that, I'm giving him zero credit.
Yeah, it's like, I wonder, he probably was a Warriors fan the past couple of years, and now is a Lakers fan. Like, that'd be my guess. But we'll see if this guy ever wants to reply to me on Twitter or message me again or something. I'll be looking out for it. But for now, Zach 1, Ravens ready 0.
D-Lo.
You okay there, Eric?
Yeah, no, I'm good. I was just laughing.
Eric's dead. You killed him.
I may have died.
Gotta get Kawhi Leonard now to take over the show.
Yeah, where is he when I need him?
Yeah. All right, so going now on to my story/topic for this week's episode. I wanted to talk about Marshawn Lynch, and not really for what he did on the field this week, which is really not a lie. He didn't do very good this game, but his post-game media session and he kind of went off on a tangent here, because the reporters asked him, everybody wanted to know, Marshawn, are you going to be back next year? Are you going to be back? And we don't really know that from the answers that he gave, but he started going on like a monologue, which is weird because, this is the guy that was only there so he didn't get fined a couple of years ago.
Marshawn, do you think you guys played okay? Maybe.
Yeah, so the fact that he even said anything at all here got my attention personally, because he's not one to normally to talk and everything. So basically what he went off on, and you can see, I'm not going to read the whole thing on YouTube, but basically he was kind of giving like his advice for younger players that you should take care of your body. This is funny. They don't be taking care of their chicken right. You feel me? When I first heard it, I was like, "What?" I didn't know what at all that meant. But then context clues like chicken, like money. I just thought that was a weird acronym for it or whatever. I thought that's not a common one, at least for me. But he talked about that a couple other times here, chicken. So basically, he was like saying, keep your mental health, keep your physical health, and make sure you don't waste your money and everything, because when you retire, you're going to have all this money if you invest well and you don't blow all your money and everything. And so I totally agree with everything he's saying here, because it's something that happens all too common. And I'll go to the next slide here to bring up the statistics on it all. But so Sports Illustrated came up with the 78% number that they estimated, where 78% of NFL players go bankrupt or have financial stress within 2 years of retirement. And in the NBA, it's a smaller number because the contracts are bigger, but it's still 60% are broke within 5 years. So, and obviously this number it's like this because the average career in these sports are only a couple of years. So, you got to factor in, they're talking about practice squad and bottom of the roster type people. They make up the majority of the NFL players. It's not all Carson Wentz Goff salaries going out to players. So obviously those players have to do a lot more work to screw up their financial their financial situation if they're getting that much money. But basically, I mean, even if you play 1 year of professional football, I mean, at the minimum, I think the contract in NFL is like a 500,000. So that's, it's not a lot for football standards, but that's quite a bit to be making in just one season. So yeah, you're probably gonna need to like have a career and go on to do different jobs after football is over. But still, with that money, you should be able to afford a house and feed your kids and not end up being broke and have to like work 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. And basically, I read an article from the Undefeated, which was interesting, and I'll go back to it to get the names right. So they talked about Lewis Neal and Russell Davis. So these are two different generation guys, and Russell Davis was a top pick and they have kind of different stories, but Davis was a top pick back in like the 70s, I think, and he was a center for the Steelers, and he got a bunch of money. He played 5 years, but he talked about how he was always blowing his money because he felt like he had to. He saw guys making more than him, and he would go eat at those type of restaurants when really he shouldn't have done that. He said like the first thing he got was a luxury car, and then he was like, to have a luxury car, you got to have a 3-car garage. And then all these things trickle down, and then pretty soon he also said that his agent took advantage of him, which happens all too often as well. But it was sad because he lost a bunch of money, and then 5 seasons he got cut and didn't have anything, and so he went broke and everything. And then he started, sharing his story to a lot of people. He's okay now, obviously, but he's a huge advocate for players being financially aware of their finances and everything. And then kind of on the opposite, the Lewis Neal, his story was he just grew up loving finances, and he wanted to be like an investor. And he said in his childhood, he dedicated his life basically to football and investing because he didn't come from much. He came from a poor family, and he said instead of watching TV or, just wasting your time doing stuff like that, he would read books on investing, and he would, do those sort of things so that he would become financially literate for when he would get drafted into the NFL. So when he came into the NFL, he would know what to do with his money, and he wouldn't end up being one of these 78% people. So, which he did. And he also another thing, he wanted to educate people. So he went to LSU, and he basically, all his teammates, he was kind of preaching that, like, when you go pro or whatever, make sure you have savings and make sure you don't waste your money on all this stuff. And so, I mean, it's not like, obviously nobody's really going to disagree that this is important or anything. So it's not like a controversial topic to have, but it is just something. I had no idea that this number was this high. Like I figured it would be a sizable number, but this is a majority. I mean, this is almost 80%, which is crazy, to think about. 80% of players could, in the case of Russell's story, he said that he went back to school to finish his degree, and he was like a janitor there, and basically he was one of the people working with him, or one of the people's houses he was cleaning, thought they recognized him as Russell, the former Michigan player. And he said shamefully, he said that he wasn't him because he didn't want to have the embarrassment that he was an NFL player that is now working as a janitor. So obviously this is a alarming trend, I think, that this number is this high. And so what ways that the NFL and NBA are doing to combat this is the Players Association really stresses this financial advisors thing. So this is a screenshot here from their website, and this is literally the main website of the NFLPA. So they have right in the middle there financial advisors, which you can click on and get more information about. But basically, I really do think that this is important because I mean, it's just sad to see players that were on the teams that you loved living so great. I mean, they're having great lives and everything. It's like they feel like they're on top of the world. Kind of like Lynch said, like take care of your body and everything. They just think that, oh, I'm gonna play like Tom Brady and have a 20-year career. When in reality, that's extremely rare to happen. So I just hope that that these associations are able to educate more people on financial awareness, and that's all really I have to say about this. So I'll let Eric, now that he's heard the story about Marshawn Lynch and then these statistics, give his thoughts on this matter.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about Marshawn Lynch saying these things after the game or whatever, so I was definitely intrigued to see about what you were going to say that he said and what all type of information you were going to provide and everything. I also did not realize that it was 78% that were struggling after their careers, although I did know that it was a high number. I have heard about these types of problems in the past where players go broke pretty frequently, and I think that the NFL is doing the right thing here with having the information for the NFL Players Association to get financial advisors. And I've also heard that also another thing they do, I want to say it's when this happens when players are going through the combine or sometime around that time, like close to before the draft, where the players that are wanting to go into the draft are actually required to take a brief financial course that just lasts like a couple of days or something. It's just, I guess, basic information to help try to prepare them for what it's going to be like. Because the problem is that you just have so many of these kids, which is basically what they are, when they first come into the NFL. Most of them are between the ages of 20 and 23 when they're first joining the NFL. And a lot of them, kind of like the story that Zach shared about the player that, came up from nothing. I mean, that's a lot of the players that come into the NFL. A lot of the players that come into the NFL aren't necessarily, players that come from rich families that already have a lot of money and their experience with money. A lot of them, came from poor towns or just, their parents were working two jobs to try to get them through school. And so they're living paycheck to paycheck, and, they've never seen more than a couple $1,000s maybe. And so, then they get in the NFL and they get that first big check. Their natural instinct is to spend it, whether it's to buy a new house or buy a new car or, whatever, a bunch of like jewelry or a bunch of expensive things that they don't really need. That's the problem, is just that they're young and a lot of them are uneducated. And personally, which going beyond the NFL, I really wish in like high school and in college, but especially in high school, I wish there were more classes that people could take regarding finances and managing money. Because some of the classes that I was required to take, I would always think to myself, why do I need this? Like, what would I ever use this for? But then whereas like, learning about money is huge. I mean, everybody needs money. It's essential, it's essential to living, and you have to be able to manage it right. And it's staggering to me, to see that 78% are broke within 2 years. And especially with the salaries being even higher today, maybe if this type of stat came out back in the 70s or something, or the 80s, then I wouldn't be quite as surprised, because it's not, while they were making more than most people still back then, it wasn't anywhere near the level of money it is today now. Like Zach said, even like the cheapest contracts are around $500,000 or $600,000. Around $500,000 or $600,000.
You do got to remember the $500,000 is like, compare that to how much 500,000 was in 1980 or whatever. It's a lot.
Yeah, there's inflation.
Well, and then even like, in today's time now, $500,000. Okay, but compare that to the average salary that most Americans make. I mean,
Oh yeah, it's
I
like
make under $30,000 a year. Like, and
yeah. I mean, like yeah. I
but
mean, like the average is
not
probably like
broke.
45,000. So it's like
Yeah, yeah, it's a huge difference. But the problem is just they don't know what to do with it. And like Zach said with the one guy, there's a lot of peer pressure. You want to be cool, so got to have that big mansion that you can show off on Instagram, or that cool sports car that you can pull up with, and people will be like, "Oh, that's so and so," and they got to be cool and hip and everything. And when really that's not what. Well, obviously you can have luxuries if you're making money like that. You need to put money aside in savings and in the stock market or in real estate, or put it in something. Savings money, do something with it. So this is probably actually something I'll mention when I'm writing my book. Just the amount, which this is another thing, just with people in life in general. It's amazing how many people I've heard of or heard stories about that were making 100,000 plus every year, but yet they're broke and have no money because they're going into debt or making monthly payments on things that they shouldn't really even be doing. And and it's like, I sit at 30,000 and I'm almost debt free now, and I don't have a Lamborghini or anything, but like I have everything I need in my life, and and I'm doing that on way less income. And so it's just, managing money is so important, and I wish athletes knew how to handle it better. I do think the proper steps are being taken though, which is good, but it's definitely obviously still an issue if 78% are still struggling after being out of the league for 2 years. So hopefully 5 years from now the reports will be improving about this, because I love talking about money. I could do it for hours, and to hear this type of thing just kind of, I didn't realize it. I knew it was bad before, but I figured with hearing some of the things I'd heard about in the past, I figured it wouldn't still be this big of a problem. So hopefully they can get it straightened out, and these players can get the advice and help they need to manage their money better. So I'll leave it with that.
Yeah, good.
Well,
good job there, man. Well said.
I was gonna
go
say
ahead.
something too, like with you talk about they have these financial advisors, but if you want to take advice from any former player, because I think this is one player that I remember, in particular, who probably did one of the smartest things I've ever heard, was Rob Gronkowski. Basically, the whole time that he was in the NFL, all of his contracts and everything that he got from the Patriots, he basically just stored away in a bank account somewhere. And the way that he lived was he lived off of his. I mean, like a lot of not as big time players can't quite do this, but it's still a precaution that he took, was that over the course of his time in the NFL, he lived off of his signing bonus and endorsements, but all of his actual contracts he stored away in a bank somewhere and never actually spent a dime of his contracts while he was playing, which is actually incredibly smart.
It is, yeah.
That's super smart.
But going back to what Eric said, I guarantee you, he had some knowledge about the importance of finances and stuff.
Right.
So that's why that stuff is so important. I mean, that's nobody's gonna be like Gronk and being on TV and all these Head and Shoulders commercials and all that stuff. But but yeah, that's still definitely. I mean, when you're making that much money, you can easily, save a large percentage of it for the future, so you don't have to work another job. You can get an early retirement and everything, and you have great opportunities for your kids now. So, yeah, well said here, guys. So we'll move on now. I mean, we could talk a lot more about that, but we'll go on to Nate's topic, talking about the Astros.
Yeah. So today, I know our podcast usually is focused on football and basketball, NBA, college football, NFL, all that. So we haven't talked too much about baseball. So, but today's kind of an exception. There's probably the biggest sports-related story of today was the Astros were handing down a bunch of really severe penalties for cheating that went on during their run up to the World Series back in 2017. So since I know like what our podcast kind of focused on in the past, I'm assuming like most of our listeners, maybe are more of like NFL or basketball fans, might not follow as much of baseball. So I'll kind of give a rundown of what the Astros did, and then what their punishment was from the MLB, and then kind of what it means for the sport and a few other like organizations and people going forward. So I'm gonna start with what they did. Zach, if you want to click to the next slide, I've got a picture that kind of corresponds. Yeah, there it is. It's kind of grainy, but basically what happened was the Astros were caught with a sign stealing operation going on during their games. So basically, like when when a pitcher is going to throw a pitch, the type of pitch that is selected is based off like a predetermined sign. So like the catcher will hold up like a 1 or a 2, 1 finger, 2 fingers if it's a curveball or a fastball or whatever he wants the pitcher to throw, and the pitcher will see that and obviously throw that pitch. But what the Astros were doing was they had a way to figure out what the other team was going to throw, and then their hitters would be ready for it. So they basically positioned a camera out in center field. I believe this only happened in their home stadium in Houston. I don't think they set it up anywhere else. They set up a camera out in center field and had it positioned on the catcher where he was giving the signs, and then that camera feed went like live into a setup kind of behind their players' dugout, and like the walkway from the players' dugout into the clubhouse, which you can see in this picture. That's where they had a monitor and all this like wiring going on to get the live feed in there. And then basically what they would do is there'd be some guy like monitoring that, and then he would make a phone call out to the dugout and say, hey, this specific sign was just called, and it would usually be one specific pitch they were trying to watch for. Like if a guy had one like signature pitch that's extra hard to hit, or one that the guys should be watching for just in particular, like they would watch for that and then report it if they saw it called. So the guy, this is a picture. This is actually a picture from a screenshot of like the Astros like World Championship DVD. Like anytime a team wins a championship, they got like the movie of the whole year, like all the highlights and stuff. This is actually just an unintended shot of Jose Altuve walking through the little area, and they just happened to have that set up in the back. Totally unintentional, but that was a big piece of evidence in this particular case. But where's it going? They okay, yeah, so kind of got sidetracked. But the guy in this picture, he would basically make a call out to the dugout, and then either a coach, like an assistant coach, or a player who wasn't active would sit, and if it was the pitch they were looking for, they would bang on a trash can. And there are several like shots or clips from game footage where you could hear like through the broadcast a big banging noise is coming out of nowhere. Like no one really knew what it was like live. Thought maybe it was like fans making noise or something. But when all these like details came out, people kind of pieced this stuff together and found out that, hey, the Astros were tipping off pitches using that trash can signal. So basically this whole like complex operation going on to let their hitters know what pitch was coming so they could hit it better, strike out less, all that stuff. And then they won the World Series that year. So a lot of people rightfully are saying that, hey, maybe they wouldn't have won the World Series if they weren't cheating like this. So what happened today is, after it's been a few months of investigation, I know this story first came out in like late October, November, I believe, right after the Astros were actually playing in this year's World Series. But the MLB finished their investigation. They handed down a bunch of severe punishments for the Astros. They took away the team's first and second round picks for this year and next year's draft, which is pretty huge punishment, obviously. They suspended the team's manager, like basically their head coach, and their general manager for they gave them both a 1-year suspension. And since that suspension was handed down, the Astros fired both of them. And as part of the investigation, the MLB is also looking into Alex Cora, who is currently the head coach for the Boston Red Sox, but he was hired. There he is up in the top right corner if you're watching on YouTube. But he was hired after the Astros won the World Series when he was an assistant there. So they're saying that he, as an assistant coach, he potentially had a pretty big role in this situation. So they're looking at possibly suspension for him, which is rumored that it'll likely be even more than what the Astros coaches got, because what they're saying in the investigation is that he was like actually involved with the hitting the trash can or getting the signs from the camera feed. So that could be a big deal for him. So basically, like, kind of going forward from this, it could be a big deal for the Red Sox because they hired him as head coach. His first year, they won the World Series. Last year didn't do very well, but obviously the pieces are still there to try and have a good year next year. But if he were to get a year suspension or worse, that would obviously kind of set the team back, losing their head coach. And if he does get suspended, it's likely that Boston would fire him and just go in a totally new direction at coach, judging by what the Astros did, firing their suspended coach and general manager. So aside from Cora, though, I don't think the Red Sox would have to forfeit any draft picks or anything like that because they had no involvement in the cheating. They just kind of hired the coach who was there, and they had, as far as anyone could tell, they had no knowledge that he was involved. So nothing on the Red Sox, just their coach slightly going to get in trouble. And then as far as the whole MLB goes, there's been some rumors since the suspension was handed down. Former players have been kind of said like they've experienced a similar situation with other teams. They suspected like other teams around the league were doing the same thing the Astros were, which there's been no other evidence to substantiate that. It could just be players who are like bitter that they got cut by such and such team. Players bitter that they didn't have a good game against this team. Like, who knows? But I think it's going to be interesting here going forward. I think that we're probably going to hear a lot more about this story. I think there's going to be a lot more that comes out about potentially other teams doing the same thing, because not that, hopefully it doesn't, because that would kind of discredit the whole sport. But as we kind of saw with the steroid, kind of crisis back in the early 2000s, like 1990s, like once some people start cheating, like it's not usually long before the rest of the sport catches up. Barry Bonds and like Sammy Sosa are like the big names like that did steroids, but there have been all kinds of former players that came out and said like, 85% of the league was on steroids at that time. Like, you can't just blame Barry Bonds, like he's a scapegoat or whatever. So it's potentially troubling that, given that history, who knows if a bunch of other teams were doing the same thing or they adopted the same thing like last season after, seeing that the Astros have gotten away with it. Who knows? Hopefully that, these crazy severe suspensions, hopefully that will, discourage any other teams from trying this. But I don't think it's like the last time we'll hear this story. I think it's going to be definitely an ongoing situation, especially because we got two coaching searches for two of the top tier teams in baseball. So definitely a big story going on here.
Yeah, it's interesting when I first heard about this with the Astros, it was funny. I actually didn't see this. It was funny. It was my girlfriend who mentioned, she's like, have you seen what's going on with the Astros? I was like, what are you talking about? Like, the Astros, like, what do you mean is going on? Like, oh, they're like something about like, they're like when they were in the World Series and everything. I was like, man, they were in the World Series like 2 years ago. Why are they talking about that? And I looked it up and I was like, oh man, like they're actually getting them for sign stealing, which is crazy. I mean, makes you think somewhat over to, what goes on, how there's been all these allegations again against Bill Belichick in the NFL, but like this is far more severe for, from what they found for in the MLB. And
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me it's like, it's like the MLB can't catch a break. The league was just kind of really in the last 5 years or so, really just starting to get over the whole steroid era thing. And now, they have this going on. And it is what Nate said. What really caught my attention was, how when there was the steroids, just like, oh, like 85% of players did it. And so also the question begs how many teams were doing this, kind of like how in the NFL, when it all came out with, the New England Patriots Deflategate thing, how everybody was saying like, oh, well, yeah, the Patriots did it, but, all these other quarterbacks also do it too. So, I mean, like, I don't think they ever investigated anything because it wasn't really that big of a deal. But, it's just like they're saying like, oh, Peyton Manning uses underinflated balls and Drew Brees does this and Aaron Rodgers actually likes the ball overinflated and blah, 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 blah. So it will be interesting to see if, because I have no doubt the MLB is going to launch more investigations into this. And I do think they're going to find more teams that got involved in it. And I mean, unfortunately for, a lot of the fans of the top tier teams, like, I tend to pull for the Yankees. I wouldn't be surprised if they get caught in this too. Cause who knows, maybe it's the reason why some of these teams are top tier is because they've been having this going on. So, teams like the Yankees or the Twins or, the Dodgers might start coming under fire for this. So I'm really curious to see where it goes. And also, I know they've talked about that the Red Sox are probably going to get, or at least the coach is probably going to get a lot harsher penalty than what the Astros got. So I'm interested to see what they give to the Red Sox. I remember when they started this, they were kind of mentioning like, oh, well, could they take away the teams like, World Series? Like they have the right to take away their World Series title and whatnot, but I don't think that'll happen. But it'll be interesting to see what the MLB decides to hand down to Alex Cora, if it's, and they'll probably do the same thing. Like they'll probably take away their first and second draft picks like they did with the Astros. But all the indicators are pointing to, I mean, it's funny. I'm actually looking right now at this one article. The headline is from NBC Sports, says Alex Cora is a dead man walking. So,
I doubt it.
yeah. So I mean, we'll see how it goes, but it's just bad for the sport of baseball. The fact that they can't seem to get over these sorts of things, and I'm sure they probably still have some issues with, they haven't fully gotten away from doping and stuff in baseball either, because they've never really had the crackdown regulations that like the NFL and the NBA and all these other sports have on it. So just a bad look for the MLB. Never good when there's a big cheating scandal, but we'll see. It is going to be interesting. Also, the coach and the manager searches that goes on for the Astros and the Red Sox. And I mean, the Red Sox already kind of fell off a little bit this year. It'd be interesting to see if they, what happens with the team if they, if when they get a new manager, if they fall out of contention, which I don't think's going to happen too much, because I feel like in baseball, the managers aren't quite as important as, say, like the head coach in basketball or in football. But it's definitely going to have an effect on the team for sure.
Yeah. I just got to say, though, how stupid are the Astros for letting this screenshot happen in their team championship video? Like, yeah. I mean, like they deserve what they get for just allowing this to be published in a championship documentary thing. Like,
right.
Stupid tax right there.
Look at it.
I mean, it's kind of like the whole thing that Pats just went through with the, people call it Deflategate too. Like people that technically worked for the organization, but not like with, actually with the team, like got caught videoing, stuff for some other documentary. The Bengals game.
The Bengals of all teams.
Like, these teams gotta like watch what their
their social media, videos.
Well, and also like the people they talk to, because like it was whoever was like monitoring this guy who like used to work for the Patriots or whatever was the one who found out and was like, he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And he's like, oh, like, come on, man. Like, I didn't mean it. It's like, you got to be careful
Yeah.
who you interact with and who you talk to, because not everybody's going to, lay over for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll move on to the next topic now. Talk about something a little bit more optimistic and positive than that story. Eric, tell us about the Thunder.
Yes.
It's your time, man.
Yeah, man. Well, back on the Astros thing, I mean, that's just terrible. I don't follow baseball that much, so I had heard the rumors about it that they were going to be investigated, but I didn't realize the news had broke about all this. But crazy story, Nate. I mean, that.
Yeah.
Wow, dude. I'm glad that I'm not in that situation with any of my teams. I would hate to be an Astros fan or a Red Sox fan right now. But anyway, yeah. So I'm gonna talk about a basketball topic. I was trying to think of what I was gonna bring to the table as my topic, since Zach and Connor already had football topics planned, and then Nate brought up the baseball topic. I was like, well, let me think of something basketball related. And the NBA has been a little quiet recently, but I decided to bring up the Oklahoma City Thunder since they are my favorite team, and just wanted to give a brief overview of how their season's going so far and how surprisingly well that they are doing with all the moves they made in the offseason. I was expecting the season to be pretty trash.
Yeah, you like I keep saying multiple times, you abandoned me on the take a walk and eat a taco.
Yeah, man. Connor and I, we almost did that like when the season first started, but we were like, well, no, when our teams are like 1-2, it looks a little silly if we're like, oh, our season's over, so
yeah.
I was like, we'll give it to about 25-30 games, and then when both of our teams are sitting at the bottom of the barrel at like 8-22, then we'll go and do this taco thing. But
hey, well, at least the Hornets are still somewhat in it. We're still the ninth. We're still the 9 seed.
I mean, and I would still say that they're above. They've been above expectations as well, for sure. Like, they're not doing as bad as the Warriors or the Knicks. So you got
the Hawks.
The Hawks have been horribly bad. But anyway, so yeah, if you had told me that about 40 games into the season that the Thunder would be doing better than Zach's Trailblazers, I would have been shocked, because the Trailblazers on paper just are such a much better team, but they're still working on figuring it out. But my Thunder, man, I've been really surprised at how well they're doing. And I know some people might say, oh, well, 22-17, that's not that amazing of a record, but the expectations for the Thunder were just so low going into the season. I mean, they were trading everybody and just stockpiling draft pick after draft pick. And I mean, as soon as we traded Paul George as part of that deal for them to get Kawhi, I was like, our season's already over. And it hasn't even started yet. I'm like, we traded away our best player. What were they thinking? And then Russell Westbrook followed shortly after, which that one I actually didn't mind as much as I like what he's done for the team and how hard he plays and everything. He's definitely overrated as a player overall, in my opinion. But I guess my biggest surprise with the Thunder was when they traded Russell Westbrook for Chris Paul. I really wasn't happy with getting Chris Paul, and for two reasons. Well, I guess really three reasons. First of all, the obvious one was I hate his contract. He still has like 3 years, $120 million on his contract. I was like, we need to be shedding money, not gaining money. And I knew they couldn't just trade Russell Westbrook for draft picks, because Houston wouldn't been able to afford that. So I knew we would have to take on some money, but he was like the last one I wanted. And then two, his age. He's in his like mid 30s, which for basketball is getting up there in age. And then three, he's had concerns with different teammates in the past, especially in Houston. There was a big falling out between him and James Harden, and my thought was, man, I really don't know if I want somebody that is suspicious of being a locker room cancer being on my team, especially since we're trying to develop these young guys and become a younger team and everything. But he has worked out very well so far. The combination of him, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Dennis Schroeder at point guard, they've been basically doing a 3-guard rotation between, or having 2 of them on the floor at the same time, even though they're all point guards, really, just, and then rotating them in and out. And it's worked out really well. And when they've been clicking, and they're 11-4 in their last 15 games. Some of the games have been blowouts, like they blew out the Houston Rockets, and they're beating good teams. It's not like they're just they've been on a stretch where they've only played garbage teams or something. They beat the Clippers too. They've beaten some good teams, and they did lose to the Lakers their last game. That one was not a very good game, but I am impressed with how well this team is playing. And what a lot of people don't think about too is in the beginning of the season, the Thunder were losing a lot of games, but most of them were really close games. And they were they came close to beating the Bucks. While they didn't come close to beating the Lakers this last time, the first 2 times they played the Lakers, they came close to beating them. They came close to beating Houston the first time they played them, actually had a lead for most of that game. And so people don't really think about that. And that now when they're having these closer games, they're starting to win more of them than they're losing them. It's kind of like they're getting the ball rolling. Now, I don't know how far they're going to be able to take it, or if they're going to be able to keep this success up, but this has definitely been a pleasant surprise for me. And it's nice that at least one of my teams in professional sports is doing well, especially with it being one that was expected to be so bad. So, and they still have so many draft picks for the future. Like, the sky could be the limit within the next 2 years for this team. So I'm glad I have kept my allegiance with the Thunder all these years. It looked like it was going to be a terrible thing going into this year, but they're doing pretty well. I'm very happy about it, and curious about what your guys' thoughts on the Thunder are so far this year.
I mean, I don't watch a ton of basketball. Like, I definitely keep up with it though. I haven't sat down and watched a whole lot of Thunder games specifically, so I can't talk on like specific, players I've been impressed by or anything like that. What I will say is, like, I definitely agree. Like, I didn't really give the Thunder a whole lot of thought coming into this year. Like, I thought at this point they'd be down kind of by where the Pelicans are, where the Kings are in this like graph we got here. Because besides Chris Paul, I mean, and Steven Adams, maybe I couldn't really name anyone on that team coming in this year. Just like the whole roster, like, wasn't a whole lot of like big name talent, but I'm impressed with what they're doing there, and I think hopefully it's setting them up for like this year. They're probably gonna fight for a playoff spot. It looks like, with how many teams make the playoffs, but I think next year hopefully it'll set them up for even more success. Hopefully, kind of build around a couple of these guys.
All right, yeah. I don't really know what else to say either, but I'm not a fan of the Thunder, so I don't really want to talk about their success.
Come on, Zach.
No, I agree with you what you said though. Russell Westbrook being overrated. I totally agree with that, but
and yeah, him, and obviously don't mention James Harden's name around Aaron.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, man.
So we'll move on. We're kind of short for time anyway, so we'll move on to Connor's topic now. Like, good positive subject there for you, Eric.
Seriously, with my Jags being so bad, and the college football team improved, but the way the men's basketball team has been this year, I'm like, man, I got like nothing to root for right now. But surprisingly, I have.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Yeah. So I was gonna move on and talk about the Baltimore Ravens, because obviously, not so much to. I'm not sure how many of us were really thinking this was a possibility. I know obviously Zach, because he picked the Titans, and then I know I said that like I thought the Titans definitely had a chance, but I don't remember what Eric and Nate's opinion on this was, but like to most of the NFL world, big upset when Tennessee beat Baltimore in the divisional round the other night. And so I think the question now for the Baltimore Ravens is that where can they go from here? Because, it was kind of a surprise last year when they kind of sneaked into the playoffs. They were able to beat the Browns in that last game and eliminate the Steelers from the playoffs and get that spot. But then, they went and lost that home playoff game to the Chargers after thoroughly demolishing them a couple weeks earlier in the season, which was pretty surprising. And then the Chargers just went into Baltimore and manhandled them. So, and now obviously this year where they were the number 1 seed, Lamar Jackson is the MVP. It hasn't been decided yet, but it's more than likely he's going to be the MVP this year. So, and then once again, they go into the playoffs and, they even get a first round bye this time. And again, in front of the Baltimore fans, they just get thoroughly outplayed by the Tennessee Titans. And so the question for the Ravens is where can they go from here? And my opinion on the Ravens is that I feel like they're probably not going to be, some of these teams that you look at and you see, and they're like, this team is, they're built for long-term success. They're going to be a force for many years to come. They've got a good young base. They've got the pieces. I'm not so sure about the Baltimore Ravens because I'm not just saying that because I hope that they do bad because I'm a Steelers fan. But, I'm not so sure about the Ravens having long-term success because, I think I said this before when we did our AFC North preview. I feel like Lamar Jackson's probably not going to be around terribly long. And I feel like he's almost kind of hit his peak at this point. Like he's had the MVP season. He's only, it's only his second year in the league, but I feel like he's hit his peak. And, he can't really go much better from this. Teams are starting to figure it out. Some of these quarterbacks that run like a more college style offense, they get to this point where, they're having a lot of success, like kind of like Colin Kaepernick did. And, when Russell Wilson first came into the league, Russell Wilson's still really good, but when he first came into the league and people weren't sure, they have a lot of success to start with, but then it just kind of dies out over time. And the other big question for Lamar Jackson is, he's not a terribly big guy. I know he's, somewhat big, but he's not like a Josh Allen or a Cam Newton or one of those guys kind of size. And so it's inevitable that he's going to get hurt. Doing the play style that he does when he's in the playoff game, he ran the ball 20 times, which, for a quarterback, if you're not, a huge quarterback and not a big body, not used to taking hits all the time, then it's just going to lead to injuries. He's 6'2", 212, which is a far cry from Josh Allen's like 6'4", 240. Then Cam Newton's like 6'5", 260. So they're built to take these hits. And the other thing for Lamar Jackson is his throwing, because I think people kind of overestimated how good his throwing was throughout the course of the season just because the Ravens were so good. But actually, when I was going back and watching the Ravens-Titans game, they did pop up with a graphic on the screen where, they were showing the Ravens' offensive totals, like where they ranked. And yes, they were first in the run thanks to like Lamar Jackson, and Mark Ingram's really good. And, Gus Edwards is coming along, but they were 27th in the pass, which for the way that the NFL is today, being a passing league, that's really bad. That your team is 27th in, most teams that are down at 27th in the passing game are out of the playoffs. They were trying to, thankfully for the Ravens, they had like the number 2 or 3 defense and the number 1 rushing offense to hold it down. But what happens when Lamar Jackson needs to start throwing? And he threw 50. I think he threw 51 passes in that game against the Ravens, which is just not his. It's not his style. Like he shouldn't have to be throwing 51 times. And the other thing I looked at in that game was, while yes, Lamar Jackson had 20 carries, between Mark Ingram and Gus Edwards, they had 9 carries between the two of them, like 6 for Mark Ingram and 3 for Gus Edwards. That number, when you have the number 1 rushing offense in the league, should be a lot higher. And it's like, it felt like to me they panicked and they got away from the running game too early because at the obviously towards the end of the game when Tennessee was up 28-6, yes, you kind of have to throw the ball more because it's how you're going to get down the field. But early in the game, it felt like to me they just got away from it. Again, like they were panicking. Lamar Jackson threw that interception. They missed 2 fourth downs. Then Lamar Jackson got strip sacked. So they just got away from it too early, and they needed that to go forward. So, but more on like their future, I just don't. Like I said, Lamar Jackson he's a short-term quarterback. He's not going to be a superstar in this league for more than another maybe 2 or 3 years. And we've seen like the Ravens, they've got this really strong defense, which there's a lot of nice, mostly young pieces on that defense. I mean, Matthew Judon is one of them, and they have, Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters are 2 young, fairly young. Well, Marlon Humphrey's really young, but Marcus Peters is a fairly young cornerback. But Earl Thomas is definitely getting up there in age, and then especially on the offensive side, I mean, Mark Ingram's no spring chicken. He's 30 years old now, which is pretty old for a running back. So he might not be around for too long. Then, I think Gus Edwards, I'm not sure if he's built to be a number 1 running back. And I don't know if he's announced it yet or if he said it earlier, or maybe I'm just imagining this, but did Marshall Yonda say something about like wanting to retire after this season? I haven't
heard that, but I also would be surprised.
He's right. Because he's ancient at this point for, especially an offensive lineman, he's like 34 probably. So, you lose a key piece on your offensive line, which for a running game, you need an offensive line. And then the receiver situation, I mean, Willie Snead he's a slot receiver. He's not a number 1 receiver. Seth Roberts and Marquise Brown. Seth Roberts is another slot receiver. Marquise Brown's trying to get there, but he's not quite there. And the other question for them is how long are they going to be able to hold on? Because what's been saving them in the passing game is the tight ends. I mean, Mark Andrews, Nick Boyle, and Hayden Hurst. What was that?
Sorry, I don't know. One of my roommates is excited.
but
kicked off.
Yeah.
But Mark Andrews, Nick Boyle, and Hayden Hurst, any one of those guys could go and be a starter on an NFL team right now. So how long are they going to be able to hold on to all 3 of those tight ends? It's likely at the end of the day, they're probably only going to get to hold on to one of them. So, I think, this season, if Lamar Jackson can kind of get over his nerves, I guess, in the playoffs, because he hasn't played well in the playoffs in his 2 games that he's been in. And if the Ravens can somehow find, more of a balanced offense to go with, not that we just don't have Lamar Jackson. And the one other thing for the Ravens is that this is one thing I think that's getting away from a lot of teams is run defense seems to be a huge issue for a lot of teams these days because everyone thinks it's a passing league and they go out and buy like the best corners and the best safeties and, maybe the best outside linebackers to rush the passer. But they don't go out and buy these middle linebackers or defensive tackles that are there to stop the run. And you can see like the 2 teams that have looked the best in the playoffs so far, which, since KC's only had 1 game. So I would argue Tennessee and San Francisco, both of them have these ridiculous running games. It's not the quarterback that's taking them to victory. It's the running game. And no one thinks about that anymore. So if the Ravens can get more of a balanced rushing attack that's not just Lamar Jackson, and if they can, maybe get some more pieces for Lamar Jackson to throw to, and if Lamar Jackson doesn't get hurt, they could have some long-term success. But my opinion is, I think probably 2 or 3 years, and they're probably going to be back to, being like a 9-7, 8-8 for a little bit, and maybe trying to rebuild a little bit is my opinion.
Yeah, this is a fascinating topic here, and it's one actually that I disagree with you on because I actually think that the Ravens are positioned nicely for long-term success because now I know in the National Football League, like the dynasties and everything, aside from the Patriots, are always really short. I mean, it's very hard to keep a good team together for a long period of time. And there's a couple reasons why I think the Ravens are going to be an exception to that. And one, I'll start off with, now that the head coaching hires have all been made, they're retaining both of their coordinators. So they're keeping their offensive coordinator, Greg Roman. Their defensive coordinator's coming back. They might lose some positional coaches to other teams, coordinators, but the most important coaches are all coming back for them. And another thing about the Ravens too, they've always seemed to be like one of the most stable franchises in terms of drafting. I mean, they hit on a lot of their draft picks. So considering they've got good management that consistently drafts well and they always seem to be drafting well, that to me is a sign of a team that's going to have long-term success no matter the players. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I think with the management and the way that this team is run, I think that they're poised for long-term success. And I know I picked the Titans to win the game, but that was because of a few reasons. Mainly rust from the Ravens not playing for 3 weeks, and also the Titans being a matchup nightmare for them. So, it showed to me. The rust was evident. I think that's why they lost, because I watched Lamar Jackson miss on a lot of throws. He did things that were uncharacteristic of him. He was having a phenomenal MVP season and then is off for 3 weeks. It's just hard to come back to that status that you were at when you aren't in rhythm. You know, I know you can't. I know if you play in week 17 and you get hurt, like, it looks really bad. But you got to play, I think, in that final game of the season, because otherwise, especially when you're a number one seed, you're getting a first round bye already. You're going to get that rest in the first round bye, but keep your rhythm up, like keep the team together. And Mark Ingram, he was obviously hurt in that game. I think that's why he didn't get much carries, and they did uncharacteristically do things that were not Raven-like. I mean, they were 0 for 4 on fourth down, and they were like 71% on the season. Like, it just was all bad for them in that game, but I don't think that's going to be – I still think that they're going to be poised for success. Another reason, their division, too. I don't see a serious threat to them in the division. I mean, starting with the Bengals, they're Joe Burrow in a lot away from competing. The Browns are the Browns. I mean, like, you know, I can't believe them until they actually win the division. And then the Steelers,
or at least make the playoffs.
Yeah, make the playoffs. Yeah. And then the Steelers, I know Ben's going to be coming back, but he's still, you know, getting up there in age, and that offense needs some work. So I don't see a serious division threat right now for them. So the fact that they can, you know, get to play the Bengals twice a year, the Browns twice a year, those should be easy wins for them. Now, I'm not saying they're going to go off and win 3 Super Bowls or anything, but I still think that they're going to be – I still think that the Ravens are going to be primed for success. They've got a lot of young players. Even if Yonda leaves, I think their offensive line's still pretty good. It's one of the best in football. And like I said, I just trust that the Ravens are going to hit on their draft picks like they have been. So that's I mean, obviously I know Connor doesn't want them to, but I don't want them to either. They're in the AFC. It is pretty scary that Lamar Jackson's still here, but they're in the conference of my favorite team. So I do think that the Ravens are going to be successful still. It's not going to be like I don't envision it being like a Patriots long dynasty or anything like that, but I do think them and the 49ers, I think, are actually primed for success. I don't see either of them having a letdown going forward. So we'll see, though. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
But that'll wrap up this episode, guys. Thanks to everybody for listening. We hit 3 different sports. I think that's a record for the stories episode. But nonetheless, we'll be back next week, or we'll be back in a couple of days. No, we will be back next week because in a couple of days we're going to be on. Connor and I are going to be joining the Collier and Claire Sports Show to record an episode with them. We're going to be talking about the NFL Conference Championship games and probably some of the divisional games and how the teams got here. Then we will be back the following week to talk about how those games went and then do some other stories and stuff. So I guess, we will be off for a week, but Connor and I will be heading on to that other podcast, and we'll be sure to post that video whenever it comes out, and it should be a fun experience. I'm excited for it. It's going to be the first time that we're going to be featured on another podcast. So
I know it's kind of nice to not have to, plan out the episode ourselves.
Someone we're just going to be
for us.
we're just going to be there. We're just going to be guests. We don't got to deal with upload. For me, anyways, I don't gotta deal with uploading and all that stuff. Like, I just say what I need to say, and then they do the rest. And
Peace.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they said it's they want us to be on camera too. So I guess on YouTube, you'll be able to see me and Connor because that's how they run their episodes. They do it with the camera on, whereas we do like share screen. So it'll be a little bit different, but we'll be sending out links and everything when that video comes out for you guys. It should be a lot of fun. And yeah, and then we'll be back with the 4 of us hopefully next week. So thank you guys for listening and take care.
Bye.
See ya.
Peace.